Hi guys, this is 10.3 and today we're going to talk about intercepts. The x-intercept is the point where the line crosses the x-axis. If you'll remember, the x-axis is the horizontal axis on your Cartesian coordinate grid, so the one that's going horizontal side to side. Whenever we have an x-intercept, the y value is always going to be 0. The y-intercept is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So this would be the vertical number line, the one that's going up and down, and in the x-axis, in the y-axis, the x value is always 0. Let's look visually at what the x and y intercepts look like. If we look at graph A, the points where our line is crossing each of the axes are the intercepts. So right here, that's where it's crossing the y-axis, so that would be the y-intercept. And the coordinates of that point, we would say are, and so like it says for the y-intercept, our x value is 0, so we know if we're talking about our y-intercept, the x value is going to be 0. And then the y value is where it's crossing the y-axis. So if I count up from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, my y-intercept is 0, 4. And then my x-intercept would have a y value of 0. And the x value is where it crosses the x-axis. So if you'll notice, our line is crossing the x-axis on the negative side to the left of the origin, so it's going to be a negative, and if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, it would be negative 4 spaces to the left where it's crossing the x-axis. So my y-intercept is 0, 4, my x-intercept is negative 4, 0. All right, for B, I'm going to change colors so we don't get confused as to what goes with what. All right, so for B, if I'm looking at the x-intercepts, there are actually 3 x-intercepts, 1, 2, 3 of them. Now, you won't be dealing with graphs that have more than one x-intercept because you'll only be dealing with linear graphs of linear equations. But I put this in here just to show you that there are graphs that have more than one x or y intercept. So B has 3 x-intercepts. And the coordinates of those x-intercepts, like I said, every time we have an x-intercept, the y value is going to be 0. All right, so this first one, if I go to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's negative 6, 0. Then the next one is negative 2, 0. And the last one is to the right, so it's going to be positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. And then the y-intercept, it just has one y-intercept right here where it's crossing the y-axis, and my x is going to be 0, and the y is 1, 2, 3. We go up 3. All right. And then for the last one, my x-intercept and my y-intercept are both the same because it's crossing the x-intercept at 0 and it's crossing the y-intercept at 0. So the x and y intercepts are 0, 0. Now we can graph equations by plotting the intercepts, and the way that we can find the intercepts are by plugging in 0 for the opposite intercept that we're trying to find. For example, if we're trying to find the x-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for y, in order to graph it. So we're making a t-table basically, but we're only going to find 2 points. We're going to find what it is when we plug in 0 for x and what it is when we plug in 0 for y. So we call this our 0, 0 chart. So let's do that for number 1. If I plug in 0 for x, I have 0 minus 3y equals 6. Okay, so 0 just goes away. And then we can divide both sides by -3. And I get y equals -2. All right, so 0, -2 would be my y-intercept. All right, so on my y-axis, I'm going to go down to -2 and put a dot. And then for my x-intercept, I put in 0 for y. So I have x minus 3 times 0 equals 6. Well, the -3 times 0 is just 0, so that goes away. So x equals 6. So on my x-axis, I'm going to go, it's a positive 6, so I'm going to go to the right 6 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I connect my points and make sure you put arrows at the ends to draw my line. All right. I'm going to do the same thing with number 2. I'm going to make a 0, 0 chart by plugging in 0 for x and then coming back and plugging in 0 for y. So if I plug in 0 for x, this is what I have, and 2 times 0 is 0. Now, one mistake that I've seen students make with an equation like this is they'll say, okay, well, y equals 4. Well, y doesn't equal 4. That's a negative y. So we have to get rid of the negative by dividing by -1. All right, so that leaves me with y equals -4. So be careful when there's negatives in there. All right. And then for x, if I plug in my x-axis, if I plug in 0 for y, I have 2x minus 0 equals 4. Okay, so that just kind of goes away, and I have 2x equals 4, divide by 2, so x equals 2. All right, so on my y, I'm going to go down to -4 on my y-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4. And on my x-axis, I'm going to go to the right 2 spaces. All right, and then connect my points. That's not really on the line, on the dots. Let me try that again. Okay, I think that's a little better. All right, and there's my line. Now, for number 3, if you'll notice, there's only an x value. So this is just kind of a refresher. Remember, whenever we have something with just an x, we can think of our acronym VUX, and that tells us that it's going to be a vertical line because it's just x equals some number. So it's going to be crossing through the x-axis at -3. On my x-axis, I'm going to go to -3, which is to the left, and put a dot, and then I just draw a vertical line through that point. All right, so it just had an x-intercept, it doesn't have a y-intercept. And then the same thing with my number 4. This is y. So vertical lines, we know with VUX, are x equals some number. Horizontal lines, HOI, it's y equals some number. All right, so this is y equals some number. And so on my y-axis, I'm going to go up to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And HOI tells me I'm going to draw a horizontal line. All right, and that's how we graph using intercepts.